Welcome back for episode 28 of the Astronomical Apocrypha, the Seleukid Empire narrative let's play for Rome 2 with Divide et Impera. Last time, the Empire began to shake off decades of war weariness, arriving on the cusp of a new age, a golden era of peace, relaxing the iron grip of its military garrison and forced sovereignty, and instead inviting its subject peoples to commerce and cultural exchange. Even though the Empire had gained unstoppable momentum in its progress toward prosperity and enlightenment, a few small skirmishes were fought on its periphery. Bryzon and Sozocles secured the rebellious provinces of Libya and Africa before marching deep into the desert to drive the Romans from their last outpost at Garama. And Seleukos Kallinikos took his expedition to its greatest and final lengths to secure the Roxolanian city of Ra, in the far northeastern corner of the known world. Antiochos Hierax brooded and seethed over the lack of recognition of his own exploits, and the reports that his brother would return to Antioch to be crowned the sole emperor of the mighty Seleukid state, signaling an end to his mother's reign as regent and his own ambitions to rule separately over a sovereign western Seleukid state. Even a brutal execution of the last Roman noble family at Sardinia did little to slake Hierax's thirst for power and wanton bloodshed, and the viceroy of the west set sail for the southern coast of Gaul in a bid to recapture the region's lucrative wealth for himself. Hyginus, you are looking hale and healthy. Thank you for bringing these troops in such fit condition. I do not think that people want to see their emperor parade through Antioch on a pack mule. I'm compelled to serve, my emperor. Your name has its own power now. You've taken your own place in the pantheon of the royal cult by your own right. What of my brother? Is he still behaving as though he's emperor of the West? Did you order him to disperse his bodyguard and return to Antioch? I sent a message to Syracuse, but he's already gone further west. Very well then. We'll catch up with him when he returns to civilization. Speaking of which, I need you to bring the noblewoman, Alkemena, to me as soon as possible. We need to go over the Imperial finances. What? Her legs swell and her lungs fill with fluid. The healer gave her an herbal preparation with foxglove, and that worked for a short time, but she can no longer rise from her bed without extreme difficulty. I doubt she'll last much longer in this state. Then I will go to her as soon as we're done here. Tell my clerk, Cleon, to come with us. I need someone to take notes. Right now, Seleukos II occupies a comfortable spot, ruling as the undisputed emperor from the heart of his kingdom at Antioch. And while he faces no real military threat, the task of administrating such a behemoth state must be mind-boggling, and the challenge we set before him to raise his imperial revenue by an order of magnitude is somewhat daunting given our underwhelming progress toward the goal in the last episode. Because of the extreme degree of bureaucracy in the empire, every step we take is weighed down heavily by the empire maintenance penalty. Many of our provinces are earning fewer than 1,000 talents per turn, and only the exceptionally lucrative regions of Thracia, Syria, Africa, Italia, and Armenia are breaking the 2,000 talent threshold. After another intern phase which sees the other remaining global powers tiptoeing around the edge of our empire, I take another look at the trade and finance details. If we were to raise the tax rate further, that would get us closer to our objective by another 11,000 talents, but still not nearly close enough given the seasonal expenditures of 43,000. We'll be able to cut that down gradually, but I expect we'll need closer to 110 or 120,000 talents in gross income to keep the empire from falling apart as we squeeze every last drop of wealth from its citizens. I'm generally continuing my policy of upgrading minor settlements as my priority, along with trade ports and the yellow agora line of cultural buildings. We have to be a little careful though, since the Tier 3 public field, the Emporion, adds a small 0.5% penalty to Empire maintenance, and we don't want that. I'll be able to demonstrate in a bit how even small adjustments in the empire-wide phenomenon cause big changes in our income. Off the coast of Provincia, Antiochos Hierax arrives on land, having bullied Adelphius into ferrying his men from Sardinia against the wishes of his brother Seleukos Kallinikos. He's trespassing against the Cessetani, the Iberian barbarians of this region, but does so with impunity, having little to fear from their chieftain and his small band of warriors. Meanwhile, Seleukos, having settled into the palace lifestyle, is handing out promotions to his friends and allies to solidify his control, and surprisingly proves to be just as adroit in his handling of the political situation as in his previous battlefield command. The political appointments have taken up the rest of our income for the turn, and our docile neighbors have little to say about the consolidation of political power around Seleukos, although the Cantabri, now openly friendly to our faction, offer and request a mutual agreement for military access through each other's lands. The province of Italia now undergoes its major overhaul, bringing the minor settlements of Ariminium, Oretium, and Laodicea by the Sea up to Tier 4 and the necessary incremental improvements to the farming infrastructure to support the larger settlements. Antiochos Hierax needs a suitable pretense to make war on the Cessetani, as they're allied with our friendly Iberian neighbors to the north, the Cantabri. Unfortunately, the Cessetani have no enemies currently with which we might find mutual cause to keep the Cantabri from choosing sides. Instead, I tried enticing the Cantabri into ending their defensive treaty in exchange for some token support in the war on the Nervii, but this turns out to be an ineffective approach. Angered and frustrated, Antiochos Hierax instead turns his attention to his more studied art of making war, ordering his troops to raid the countryside around Tolosa in the hopes of drawing the Cessetani out as the aggressors. Of course, no one is brave enough to openly declare war on the Hawk, so I have to content myself with the small amount of additional income that raiding provides and begin putting it towards upgrades in the Caucasus and Persia, with a little to spare for Cisalpina. And the situation goes on like this, another season passing without any opposition but enough peace and abundant wealth to continue our building improvements, with major upgrades now underway in several more provinces, including those in Illyria, which are begun in the summer, with new projects being undertaken well into the fall. As the winter approaches, Antiochos and his men have been able to strip less wealth and sustenance from the Cessetani lands, and I've even tried offering the Cantabri an agreement to join their war in the Gatulians, plus all of the cash at my disposal to break their bond with the Cessetani. But it seems these Iberians are men of their word. The monotony of the peacetime infrastructure improvements is interrupted to a degree by the appearance of bad news in the spring of 220 BC. One of our most senior noblewomen has died of old age, Alkemena, who is in charge of governing the capital city of Antioch and the surrounding province of Syria. It seems that the administrative vacuum in the city has hit our income pretty hard, and it's an unpleasant reminder that many of my high-level governors and noblewomen must be getting on in age by this point. I can quickly elevate a new governor, Cleon, to take her place, but he's a pale imitation and will take years to accumulate Alkemena's experience. In addition to the incessant infrastructure building, it will improve our taxable income from within. I'd also like to pursue more trade agreements. As we've seen, those actually provide a substantial portion of our income. Unfortunately, the few neighboring regions with the ability to trade seem to have no interest in coming to an agreement because they either don't trust us or just don't like us. In order to force them to see the error of their ways, I've decided to try to target some of the smaller barbarian powers near the Danube and force them to trade their slaves and other trinkets by subjecting their city-states. Dymas, though he doesn't have any artillery, is still well equipped for a fight, with his legionaries and veteran Jewish slingers of the Slayers of Goliath, so I first sent him after the minor settlement of Segestica, which is now held by the Rusii. They have a strong defense with a full-stack army reinforcing the garrison, but I'm going to try my luck and see if we can beat these two armies with our superior troop quality and a careful approach. The village is shrouded in woods, but there are multiple possible approaches, the most open area being the northwest. It's from there that we'll make our assault, as I deploy the infantry in a line with the pikes and hoplite anchored by the small compound on the left, and the thorax legionaries extending to the right, and the light cavalry on the far right wing. As I begin splitting up the force to take advantage of the avenues of attack, we see that the defenders are mostly bunched up east of the capture point, gathered beneath the hill on which their circle of stones have been built. There are fairly narrow avenues leading up to this area from the north and west, and I'm hoping that adopting the narrow front required in the city streets will enhance our man-to-man advantage and eliminate the possibility of getting flanked by the greater number of enemies. I'm also expecting to get some good results from my veteran Jewish slingers, as they are able to focus their stones on the densely packed Brusii infantry. The legionaries briefly pause for the rest of their army to get in place, and as they do so, I decide it would be sufficient to plug the western approach with only 2 units of elite swordsmen, and devote the other 2 to the narrow southwestern access. Meanwhile, the Longophori circle around the southern edge of town, beyond the tree line, giving a wide berth to the enemy archers, who are now subjecting my own heavily armored legionary and hoplite infantry to heavy fire, although we seem to be weathering the storm well in contrast to the more lightly armored barbarian troops, some of whom are already wavering due to the losses suffered by the Jewish slingstones. The standoff is broken by a suicidal pack of Celtic garrison warriors who charge by themselves directly into my western 2 legionary regiments, who wade into the combat with their thick armor and large shields, quickly repelling the aggressors. The hoplite and phalanges have reached the inner part of the town adjacent to the stone circle on the north side, and the pikemen form up in a unified phalanx before marching in to threaten the northern flank of the western group of defenders, while the hoplites stream to the right side to form still another flanking assault force. Coincident with these maneuvers, my southern pair of legionary regiments crash into the defenders west of the capture point, and they're followed shortly by their comrades from the west, as well as Dymas himself and his retinue of shield bearers. The initial assault has had a devastating effect on the smaller western detachment of the Brusii defenders, but has also had the effect of drawing out the much more numerous Celtic defenders at the capture point to the east, as they stream into the western half of the town in a somewhat disorganized column. We could be overwhelmed by their attack if we aren't careful, but if we're able to hold the enemy away from our flanks, this could provide the opening I need to let the cavalry strike a lethal blow against their missile troops who have held back, if they're not adequately defended. Leading the Celtic horde is Baleryx, riding ahead with his retinue of Celtic mighty horse, and they charge directly in against my western legionary detachment, a daring and potentially deadly strike if it allows his army to envelop our attackers. But fortunately for us, Dymas is right there with his shield bearers to receive the charge, and as his Greek nobles unhorse their Celtic counterparts with their long spears, the southern legionaries press into the flank of the emerging column of reinforcements. So far our attack has gone just as well as I could have hoped, but we get a sign that our attack has been blessed by the gods as Dymas impales the horse of Baleryx himself, and the Brusian king is crushed to death by the weight of his own horse. This good fortune coincides with the emergence of a gap in the enemy column, as the last group of tribal spearmen leave behind their archers who remain clustered among the houses on the eastern side of town, and the Longophori are immediately ready to exploit the lapse, shooting through the gap and mauling the Celtic infantry archer corps. This carnage does draw the attention of a single group of tribal spearmen who begin backtracking to aid their comrades, but they're too late by this point as the nimble horsemen dart between the groups of Celtic archers sowing death and chaos among their ranks. It only takes perhaps half a minute to annihilate all but a handful of the Celtic archers, and the Longophori, still pursued by the hapless tribal spearmen, retreat back out the eastern edge of town like bandits, but circling back south to find another point of entry and finish the job. The deception seems to work, and again the tribal spearmen find themselves unable to defend their bow-equipped brethren, being caught on the wrong side of the action. Although the archers fall quickly, my horsemen come under attack by another unforeseen force, the homestead cavalry of Abugatos, the garrison commander. Although these aren't nearly as fierce as Baleryx's Celtic mighty horse, they're nevertheless swift enough to demand my attention and preventing another quick dash out of harm's way for the Longophori. We're able to break Abugatos' riders, but not before suffering a few casualties among our own horsemen, to the tribal spearmen who finally get a taste of revenge. As this is happening, the clash of iron on wood, leather and hide continues as the hoplites, phalangitai, and legionaries battle ferociously against the seemingly endless Celtic horde. However, there's yet another opening for my Longophori to dig in their hooves and swing the pendulum of battle in our direction. The 5 or so regiments of Celtic swordsmen facing my phalanx on the north side hold a distinct advantage in terms of armament, although they aren't able to get much traction against the wall of pikes. With their backs turned, unassisted by any anti-cavalry spearmen, and less than 100 paces away from my now unencumbered Longophori, they're a very inviting target for a rear assault. Launching themselves somewhat dangerously right into the enemy midst, and risking being caught by howling Celts on either side, the Longophori inflict a rear charge into the Celtic swordsmen fighting our hoplite. However, these groups of garrison warriors are extremely large, numbering 300 men each, and their numbers hold up to the initial cavalry charge. The Longophori become bogged down in the melee, and the bloody exchange results in horrendous losses on both sides, with one of my cavalry regiments the first to lose its nerve and flee, followed shortly by 2 of the Celtic garrison units. Fortunately, however, this takes some of the pressure off the hoplite, who are just barely holding the line. The legionary swordsmen, on the other hand, are almost completely unfazed by the mass of enemies, holding their ground and continually eroding the enemy numbers and morale with each pila throw or sword thrust. However, it's Dymas again, who swings the battle decisively in our favor, as he fires off his Inspire, Intimidate, and War Cry abilities before leading his own retinue into the flank of the northern enemy detachment near the stone circle. This has the effect of almost immediately routing the enemies at the stone circle, in turn freeing the cavalry and spearmen to strike at the flank of the larger enemy group. Seeing their comrades overwhelmed and their flank turned, the remainder of the enemy garrison and its accompanying professional army surrenders the town to Dymas and his men. Dymas earns a heroic victory for his own bravery in this action against a certainly superior enemy numbers, if not odds, although our losses were a bit high, totaling over 800, mostly legitimate enemy kills but a handful of friendly fire losses. Nearly all of our men got loads of kills excepting the pikemen, although I was surprised to see Dymas' shield bearers topped even the cavalry with their 680 kills. To create another source of income without eliminating another potential trade partner, we'll subjugate the Brusii at Segestica for now, with our eye on the Aravisi to the north. Surprisingly, being a suzerain doesn't always entitle you to trade rights with your client states, but we'll let the Brusii lick their wounds for a while before bringing them back to the bargaining table. A turn later, our income is on the rise again, now roughly back to where we were with 29,000 talents per turn. I spend a little bit finishing up my work on Illyria before devoting the rest to Macedonia. I'm also going to continue paring down my military in the areas where I feel the forces are redundant, starting with Sozocles and the Gigantes in Africa, although I leave Sozocles to function as a city governor. The changes in place and reduced army upkeep has now pushed our income to 33,000 talents per turn by the end of 220 BC. I've also decided by this point to get rid of Scylla's Terror, my secondary fleet, but again leaving Adelphius on his flagship to function as a governor. We'll send him off toward the port of Lilybaeon to put his administrative skills to work. This region, along with the rest of Magna Graecia, is an already lucrative region with room to grow, so I invest a large portion of our wealth this turn into upgrades here, focusing mainly on minor settlements which are currently only at Tier 2, the farming and industrial infrastructure, and the religious buildings to keep a nice balance of food, wealth, and public order. Before I'm done, I distribute the skill points to my hero and governor who leveled up, and although I generally don't make a big production out of these level ups, I'll show you here just how big a difference the Empire Maintenance Penalty Reduction in the Expert Supervisor skill makes, especially the first level, which gives a 3% reduction, raising our income by nearly 2,000 talents, and the subsequent level with an additional 1%, raising it another 600 talents or so. Apparently Dymas' success has reached the ears of Antiochos Hierax, and he's not pleased to have been upstaged, ordering another attempt on the life of the successful loyalist general, which fortunately is not successful. Our escalating income this turn is put to work on further upgrades in Italia, Macedonia, and Egypt, before we've once again run out of money to invest. The Cantabri have now grown large enough to be recognized in a conglomeration with their culturally similar allies as the Celtiberian Confederation, and their proximity to Carthage on the Iberian Peninsula has led inevitably to conflict. The Carthaginians would like our assistance in the war, but for now we'll decline since our primary goal at this point is to prosper, not to conquer. However, the war for Iberia has a third participant. With some uncharacteristically shrewd diplomacy, perhaps indicating the hand of Spurius Titinius, Antiochos Hierax modifies the agreement to join the war only on the Cessetani. Though they aren't as excited about the prospect, the Carthaginians agree to accept whatever help they can get, and this leaves us at war with the Cessetani but still neutral with the Celtiberian Confederation. With open war now declared, and the Carthaginians pounding away at the walls of Terrico, Antiochos quickly moves to grab his own piece of the Sessetani kingdom at Tolosa, pitting his elite veteran force against the weak garrison army, a mismatch that demands an auto-resolve and nothing more. This has, however, had the unfortunate side effect of putting us in a depleted region, with our supply lines interrupted by the presence of the intervening suspicious Massalian city-state. There's plenty of wealth for upgrades elsewhere in the Seleukid Empire, however. In this turn, a little bit goes to the upgrades in Cisalpina, while the rest is spent on Africa, another undeveloped but potentially very profitable territory. The Cessetani response to our aggression comes as a very unpleasant surprise, as they pull both of their armies out from Terrico, potentially ceding the larger walled city to the Carthaginians, in a desperate bid to destroy Hierax and reclaim their smaller home territory of Tolosa. With our army in its depleted state, thanks to my lazy use of the auto-resolve, and the lack of local supplies, the balance bar has us at a big disadvantage here. I'm skeptical since I think this elite force can probably best these barbarians, even on a bad day, but it looks like our work will be cut out for us. Where is Spurius Titinius? Shouldn't he have known about this crude counterattack? Isn't that why I keep him here? Of course, the situation is too similar to the ruse my father fell for. An apparently defenseless barbarian village, a pack of bearded barbarians howling for the blood of a Seleukid prince. It was a novel idea, when my mother thought of it. Theos fell for it, but the hawk, no. Finish covering the spike traps and make sure our archers have plenty of arrows. The Celtiberians are strong and fierce, but no match for the speed or wit of Hierax. Let this wave break upon the rock of our shields. Then we'll find out what Spurius is up to. This is another wooded barbarian village map, similar in appearance but different in layout to the setting of Dymas' victory over the Brusii. The leading enemy force is setting up north of town, and just ahead of them there's a very inviting wide avenue leading into the city that I packed full of fire pits, sharp rocks and stakes, and spike traps, while I've tried to discourage them from using the alternative entrances by blocking them off with barricades. Our strong defenders, including the shield bearers and silver shield pikemen, will hold the center of town opposite to the main enemy in advance, while the silver shields will guard the eastern side near the capture point, where I also put the minuscule town garrison for safekeeping. Our horsemen will ride out from the western side to seek a weak point in the enemy attack. As the battle commences, the enemy reinforcements appear from the east, while their smaller lead army spreads out in their approach, unfortunately most of the units avoiding the obvious traps and attacking the barricade instead. This forces me to rapidly reorganize my defenders, temporarily utilizing 2 regiments of silver shield swordsmen to guard against the enemies plunging through the northeastern street, while Hierax orders his own retinue and his shield bearers over toward the enemy flank, as the silver shield pikemen form a phalanx to block the few enemies braving the field of spikes and stakes. The enemy general and his cavalry smash into my silver shield swordsmen, who do their best to hold their ground, taking grievous losses on the charge, wavering briefly, but maintaining their composure. 1 unit of shield bearers pins the remainder of the enemy infantry from supporting their cavalry, while the other rushes to the aid of the silver shield swordsmen in their fight against the enemy general. The silver shield pikemen, supported by the archers, perform exceptionally well, fending off the enemies who are already bruised and bloodied from stumbling through the spike traps and stakes, and a few of the units break without requiring any assistance from my cavalry, who are now rounding the corner to the north. I leave behind the citizen cavalry to help finish off the infantry assaulting our phalanx on the northern avenue, while the Hippocontisti gallop off to the east to threaten the rear of the enemy assault against our swordsmen. Hierax arrives to assist the shield bearers battling against the enemy Loricati, and although I'm sure the addition of his Intimidate, Warcry, and Fear abilities was quite fearsome, the effect is certainly amplified by the coincidental arrival of the elephants, who go thundering through the rear of the enemy ranks, resulting in the northern group being quickly broken or destroyed, and opening the way for Hierax to surround the southern group of attackers facing our silver shield swordsmen. However, an even bigger force is now threatening to surround the entire combat, as the enemy reinforcements have made their way to the narrow northeastern approach, ignoring the southeastern entrance. Trying to leave my Hippocontisti free to harass the attackers, I pull them out just before the Cessetani plug that entrance, the horsemen narrowly evading the spearmen before joining the citizen cavalry to the west. As the Cessetani reinforcements funnel into the narrow northeastern avenue, Antiochos Hierax and his elephants break the remainder of their comrades comprising the initial assault, freeing our troops to reform and face the new threat. I move the pikemen up to form a phalanx blocking the western fork, while the shield bearers and swordsmen move up slowly from the south, following the wake of the elephants who continue trampling the fleeing units of broken Cessetani. Outside of the town to the north, a brief cavalry skirmish develops with a couple of Cessetani units galloping in against our citizen cavalry and Hippocontisti, and although we do take some losses, the Cessetani riders have committed themselves to a battle that they'll not win. The elephants continue devastating the enemy ranks, but find themselves now under threat as they careen into 2 front-facing spear regiments, who inflict serious damage and bring down a couple of the berserk beasts. Ignoring the peril to his men, Antiochos hurriedly orders his troops in to support his prized Syrian war elephants, and this seems to be sufficient to drive off the barbarian spearmen, who are no match for the elite Seleukid swordsmen and noble hoplite. Likewise, the pikemen have held their ground sufficiently to allow my citizen cavalry to free themselves from the enemy cavalry threat, and the ensuing rear charge is all it takes to completely destroy what little remains of the enemy attack, earning us a victory. I'd like to kill as many of these Cessetani as possible, and so a few minutes are spent running down those I can, and although we catch quite a few of them, not all can be eliminated. Another heroic victory for Hierax, for whom this level of performance in battle is the norm. We've suffered 303 casualties, exactly 10% of the 3,030 kills inflicted by our force. The elephants unsurprisingly leading the kill count in the carnage, but with very nice contributions by our Syrian archers as well. This has crippled and repelled both of the Cessetani armies, but eliminated neither entirely. At the start of the following turn, we've finished consensual contracts, and the combination of bonuses provided by this technology has sent our income soaring, now up to 47,000 per turn. The only technology remaining now in the philosophy tree is the Cult of Alexander, which has big benefits in terms of direct and indirect improvement to public order via cultural conversion, as well as a big increase to cultural income. However, after some consideration, I decided to work on city planning that will take us 9 turns and will allow Tier 4 upgrades to our major settlements, the building of which in turn will take quite some time. Playing around with the tax rate, we can get our net income up to 59,000, while the gross income would actually exceed the requisite 90,000 talents. So I think we just need about 20,000 more income at our current tax rate, and a few more military cuts to get where we need to be. Plutarchos, who has taken over for Dymas with the latter still recovering from his injuries, adds a trio of stone throwers to the Slayers of Goliath in preparation to move further east into barbarian territory. At the extreme northern end of the map, my new spy Doris has begun to make her way across the channel to Britannia. Antiochos Hierax, having now twice defeated the Cessetani, attempts to hunt down the remnants of their military, but winds up being drawn into a bit of a ruse. As he attacks the first army, they scamper just out of range for his remaining movement, so he targets the second adjacent army, and they too move beyond his movement range for the turn, leaving the western vice-regent frustrated and his new city of Tolosa now open to counterattack. The remainder of our extravagant wealth for the turn is put to use in Asia Minor at Bithynia at Pontus, with several settlement upgrades, farming and temple upgrades, and trade port upgrades and conversions. The Cessetani, though obviously not tactically brilliant, have proven a bit of crude cunning in their ruse to lure Antiochos Hierax outside Tolosa, as their previously vanquished force returns with some Massalian mercenaries from the east, doubling back and sweeping past the bewildered Hierax to attack Tolosa. Our garrison is in no shape to repel an attack like this, so I've got to give the Cessetani back their town for the moment. The next turn, after making a few more small improvements in Asia and Illyria, I've directed Hierax to recapture Tolosa, which of course is done without any trouble whatsoever. Moreover, the Carthaginians have finally destroyed their defenses at Terrico, leaving me the option to subjugate the Iberian tribe, and that's actually what I would prefer, since they provide another potential trade partner should we dip below the 15 needed for the economic victory. We can't trade with them yet, but the capture of Massaslia might change that. We'll continue spending our money toward various upgrades, still a couple of years ahead before many of the major upgrades kick in. There's still room for improvement in Africa, Magna Graecia, and Syria, but most of our provinces have upgrades underway by this point. As we'd hoped, the Brusii come crawling back to the bargaining table, choosing to put their dignity aside for the escape from poverty that trade with the massive Seleukid Empire enables. The Gaetulians have ended their non-aggression pact with us, although I'm unsure of the significance of this act, since we both share the Carthaginians as a common defensive ally. The following turn, thanks to Doris's efforts along the southern shore of Britannia, we're able to broker a trade deal with the Dumonii. And there seems to be some opportunity with the nearby Iceni, although they aren't open to the prospect for now. Further upgrades this turn are made thanks to our enormous income to top off improvements at Macedonia, Syria, and Africa, along with the somewhat neglected province of Armenia. Soon our escalating income will outstrip our technological ability to make building upgrades, which I think will be a first for this campaign. With his war engines in tow, Plutarchos heads off northeast into Segestica on his way to apply some military pressure to the Arvisi, and the Slayers of Goliath are subsequently rejoined by Dymas, while Antiochos Hierax marches carelessly through Massalian territory back towards Seleukid soil at Genua. We get a notification that Hermocrates is being blackmailed, which would presumably lower his influence, but to ransom his good name requires over 27,000 talents, an outlandish sum that no one in his right mind would pay. More upgrades to the economic infrastructure this turn at Armenia, Egypt, and Libya. I'm also leveling up Cleon and Sozocles, and the latter starts down a city governor path with his military exploits now behind him. More political maneuvering from Hierax's faction has resulted in a promotion for one of his lieutenants, although Kallinikos demonstrates with the wealth at his disposal his ability to practice nepotism on a much more grand scale. You can buy quite a few promotions with 50,000 talents. Now with Hierax at the western border of Genoa, looking down the Mediterranean coast and greedily eyeing the Massalian city-state, like a gift from the gods, he gets the excuse he was waiting for to launch a full-scale invasion. The Massalians have decided to make an ill-conceived bid for the neighboring territory in Tolosa, although now the Cessetani enjoy Seleukid protection as our satrapy. Strangely, the Massalians don't even seem to have any significant forces in the area, only a small fleet in their own port, and Hierax remains only a day's march away from their walls. To the east, the capture of the Aravisi's eastern territory has left them open to subjugation at Noria, and Dymas closes in to set up his stone throwers around the city walls. With 2 sieges to the east and west of Cisalpine looming, our territorial conquest will be complete with Hierax's imminent victory over Massaslia, and with the Seleukid economy expanding at an exponential rate, Seleukos Kallinikos has set the empire on the path to a sustainable and prosperous future for ages to come. It remains to be seen, however, if his administrative reforms will allow for a stable political environment, the failure of which has been the undoing of Greek and Macedonian ambition for centuries.